Alright, hello and welcome to the third mindset module of Series 1, which is all about trauma and programming experiences. Now, in this module, we'll look to build on the ideas we've already got about emotions and why we are who we are at the moment. This module may be a lot to take in at first and will challenge what you already know. So if feelings like, I don't quite agree with this, or you might shirk at what you hear come up, that's okay. You can stay kind to yourself and accept what you feel. I'm not looking to forcibly change your mind here. It's just a presentation of another way to deduce what's going on with us. So without further ado, let's get stuck into it. So when we start life as complete whole humans, unfiltered, with all our emotions flowing equally, we slowly learn through our experiences that to be whole is not acceptable. So to be who we are is not okay. Because if you want to be good, you can't be bad, and you can't be things like sad, angry, or anxious. So we end up repressing what we're taught to be the bad emotions, and like a mixer tap in like your kitchen or your bathroom where the hot and cold water come out the same spout, as we repress the cold water through the outlet, we also repress the hot water. So when we look to repress negative emotions we feel, we actually also repress the positive emotions like joy, happiness, excitement. So therefore we start to limit who we are in an attempt to please the people upon whose care and love we're dependent on. Now, we made a point in the first module that we're actually never formally taught in school, well, at least in England, about our emotions. So we're never taught what they are or what to do with them, other than to just shut them down and switch them off. We're never taught that it's okay to be sad, or that anxiety is just a feeling and that anger is actually quite healthy. Instead, we just repress and suppress what we feel. Now, I say the words repress and suppress because there's actually a slight difference between the two. So repression is where we're taught to bury emotions and experiences so deep within us that we don't even think about them. Whereas suppression is when we have emotions and experiences that we're conscious of, but we actively choose to not feel them. So suppression, for example, is you might have an argument in the morning with your partner which makes you feel upset and angry, but you suppress it because you've got to get to work and get on with your day. So you don't do anything with it other than pushing it down. So we therefore bury what we can to try and show that we are good enough to be loved. So at a fundamental level, we know that like parts of us are sad, angry, fearful, anxious, etc. Yet because we've spent so many years being taught that consciously and subconsciously that those parts of us are bad, we deny those parts of us and feel ashamed by them. And that's often without us even realizing it. So therefore, dealing with raw emotion is something not many of us can handle, even as adults. So when kids naturally display them, and kids have got no filters or inhibitions, we feel obliged to do something about them, especially if they make us as adults look bad. So therefore, this is the start of it, where we get told that certain behaviours and emotions that are natural to us aren't acceptable. We therefore interpret it as we're not good enough. And we carry that around like a backpack, which eventually weighs us down as backpacks do, until we take the time to unload it. So previously we've said that we label emotions as positive and negative, and effectively teach our children, and ultimately each other, that certain feelings are acceptable and some aren't. Here's the thing though, there's no such thing as a positive or a negative emotion. Ultimately, emotions are just feelings, they can't do anything, but we're the ones that have put labels on them as like good and bad, positive and negative. Now, I mentioned before that there might be things in this you might think, hang on, I don't quite agree with that, and this might be one of them. So you might be thinking, well, hang on, like anger's a negative emotion, we don't want to be angry because that doesn't look good. And what about fear? Nobody wants to feel fear, do they? That's surely negative, which is all well and good. That's cool. But consider this. Say, imagine you're walking in a jungle. It's a nice sunny day. You're minding your own business. The birds are chirping away. And all of a sudden you hear big footsteps behind you. and you turn around to see this massive big bastard of a lion roaring away at you. No means of escape, it's just you and the lion. If in that moment the emotion you feel is something like joy or love or happiness, you're fucked. You're the lion's lunch and it's game over. So in this moment, those kind of emotions would be negative to feel, because instead what might be helpful is to feel fear and anger. Fear to help you recognize the danger, and the anger to invoke the fight and spirit and survival to escape the situation. So in fact, if it weren't for fear and anger, our entire civilization might not have been able to survive long enough in these fights with bears and lions and all those kind of animals for us to have the opportunity to experience love, joy and happiness in a jungle-free environment. So you could say fear and anger are almost solely responsible for the survival of the human species. Yet today we call emotions like fear and anger negative. So if you imagine those two emotions as people who've ensured our survival for so long, they might be thinking, you cheeky gits, I've kept you lot surviving all this time, yet you've got the nerve to call me negative. That's gratitude for you, isn't it? We treat anger and fear as the type of emotions we shouldn't be feeling because we're taught that they're unacceptable. Now this loops back to a central point of the mindset transformation work that we do, which is it's not about the emotion that you feel that's the issue, it's what we think about the emotion that's the issue. So to recap that, the problem is we've been taught to think and feel about our emotions, that some of them are bad and therefore not acceptable, and some of them are good, and we should feel the good ones more than the bad ones, and if we don't, there's something wrong with us. We're often fixated on the emotions themselves and try to deal with them, as opposed to taking a step back and seeing what we think about the emotion in the first place. And in fact, what we think about it is quite significant. Now this was a big one for me personally during my own coaching journey, because it flipped my thinking about emotions, because I've always said to myself, I'm quite an emotional guy, but I never quite knew what that meant, and indeed, is that even a good thing? The revelation here was that we put a sort of meaning or causation on our emotions straight away, like, I'm feeling happy or excited or sad because of X. Now if X was a positive emotion, then we don't give it much thought, we just let ourselves experience it, because after all, who thinks of why they're happy or excited? We just enjoy being in that state. But when we feel something negative like anger or sadness or anxiety, we want to find out why we're feeling like this, and also feel like we shouldn't be feeling this way. So we want to sort of shake ourselves out of it or flip it into something positive, and we then spin ourselves into a cycle of convincing ourselves what the reason is, rather than just letting the chemical reaction take its 90-second course. So the subliminal message we're giving ourselves here is that we can't feel these negative emotions, and if we do feel them, we're not good enough. Because all we've ever experienced is that we should feel positive emotions and reject or suppress or squash down negative emotions as they're not acceptable. My coach had a brilliant visual example to highlight this messaging we receive about the emotions. He uses this clip of a footballer in England called Connor Cody, who meets a young fan, and this young fan is a fan of the team he plays for, and Connor Cody is his hero. So he meets Connor as a surprise. So there's a YouTube link in the comments for this video where you can watch what I'm about to describe, and that bit is about 2 minutes 20 seconds in and lasts for about 25 seconds. So this is the bit of the clip where the fan opens the door to what he thinks is just like the shirt printer's room, where he's just going to get a shirt printed for him. But in the room is Connor Cody waiting for him. And then when the young fan sees him, you can see him get sort of pleasantly surprised. He's shocked that he's there, and he begins to get emotional, which is wholly understandable, right? He's in front of his hero and inspiration, and he didn't even expect it. But one of the first lines he hears from his hero is, "Don't get upset. Whatever you do, don't get upset." In other words, as soon as the fan sees Connor, an adult who's his hero, the adult tells the kid to not feel his emotions. Now, this isn't meant to berate Connor Cody for his reaction or anything like that, because both sets of reaction, both from Connor and the fan, are completely normal, because it's what we feel at the time. And Connor wasn't intentionally trying to sort of order or command the fan. He just didn't want to see him get upset. But you can also see the panic setting in Connor Cody's face when he first tells the fan don't get upset, because he can't handle the emotion that's going on in front of him. Now, the clip itself went viral because in the main it's quite heartwarming, right? A young kid seeing his hero by surprise, quite a nice clip. But it shows that subconsciously his hero, a male role model, has told him his emotions are not acceptable, i.e. he shouldn't feel upset. Now again, a lot of people might be watching that comment I just made and thinking, all right, wise guy, what should he be saying instead then? Well, the whole issue is based around hearing that your natural emotions aren't valid. Therefore, instead of invalidating them, we can validate them. So you can say to the kid, for example, it's okay to feel overwhelmed or emotional. And you could extend that by saying, let's be emotional together. So now you make it a collective experience. So subconsciously, the boy recognizes his emotions that he feels are valid. So it just goes to show, even the most innocuous of phrases and meanings carry loaded subliminal messages that we've not taken the time to look into.